23. A survey of the buildings designed by Ghanaian-British architect David J. reveals no obvious signature style. His Moscow School of Management features a 2-story, 150-meter wide circular base, on top of which is placed 4 differently sized rectangular prisms. Okay, so on top of which is placed. So, okay, let's worry about first subject-verb agreement. What is it that is placed on top of the base? This is a case where the subject for this verb comes after the verb, which is unusual, but can happen. It's the prisms that are placed. It is not the base that is placed. These prisms are placed on top of the base. So I need a plural verb. And so right away, I mean, that gets rid of 3 choices because the other 3 are singular. And so we're just going to go with are. It features a 2-story base on top of which are 4 prisms. That's essentially the core of the sentence. So this is a pretty tricky subject-verb agreement question because the verb is coming after. But start with subject-verb agreement, then figure out what you're left with. Sometimes tense would matter. Maybe we'd have another choice that said are placed. In that scenario, I still think it's are because you don't really need the placed. It's just redundant. But either way, 23 is C. 24. Another of Ajay's projects, the Francis Library in Washington, features exterior walls that resemble a tiled checkerboard, alternating clear and opaque squares. Okay, again, as we've seen in the previous question, I don't need this colon here. I don't really have a complete independent sentence before it. It's just unnecessary. The walls resemble X. You don't need any punctuation to connect it, especially when you're using the pronoun that to connect them. So yeah, no punctuation needed, and so that means I'm going to go with choice C. 24. Another of Jay's projects, the library in Washington, D.C., features exterior walls that resemble a tilted checkerboard, alternating clear and opaque squares. Okay, this first part, we don't need the colon here because I don't have a complete sentence, independent sentence before the colon. And this clause can just flow straight through. Exterior walls that resemble a tilted checkerboard. There's no need for any punctuation in this position, so I want to get rid of choice A. Now, we could ask, what about the position here? Do I need some punctuation? So it says the library features exterior walls that resemble a tilted checkerboard. And then we have some break. And then it says alternating clear and opaque squares create a geometric diamond pattern. So what follows is a complete sentence. Here's the subject. Here's the verb. Alternating clear and opaque squares create. So therefore, I can't use a comma. I do need something here. I can't just have nothing because then I have a run-on. But I can't use a comma because that's a comma splice. So what I can use is a colon. So the colon is going to move here because now the sentence before the colon, before checkerboard, is complete. And then you can have a complete sentence follow your colon. Complete, colon, complete is legal because you can really have a lot of different things after the colon. You can have a word, a phrase, a list, or a complete sentence. So the only option that works here is D. Now, there's other ways you could have written this sentence, but again, we work with the choices we're given, and D is the one of the 4 that actually works. So 24 is D. 25, we want to establish the main topic of the paragraph. So what is the main topic of the paragraph? So it says, for each project, Ajay reviews extensive research about the locale where the building will be constructed. He considers the local governing structure and issues of social justice, various databases, provide him with info. He studies the history. Okay, it's all about the research he's doing, how he prepares for the project. And so when I look at the original, talking about the staffing of the firm, that's not about research. B is a very specific opening sentence that's not about research. C is talking about a signature style that he will design over his career. I mean, this is just not relevant to the paragraph. But D, very clearly, it's about research. What is common to Ajay's buildings is something that can be seen, a deeply research-focused design process. And what's following in this paragraph is exactly that process. So 25 is D. 26. For each project, Ajay reviews extensive research about the locale. I mean, that's not bad. Ajay reviews and examines lots of extensive research, wordy and redundant. Reviews a lot of extensive research, redundant. Examines and reviews, redundant. I just need one. I can just say reviews, and I'll throw in the modifier extensive there to make it clear that he's reviewing a lot of research. So As is often the case, shortest is best because it's not wordy, it's not redundant. So 26 is A. 27, he considers the local governing structure and issues of social justice. Well, looking at the surrounding sentences, reviews, provide, studies, this is all present tense, simple present. And so I'm pretty happy with A. He considers the governing structure. I don't want past tense, so B and D are out. He is considering, present tense, but if you look at the other tenses, the other verbs in this paragraph, none of them use that ing structure. It doesn't say a J is reviewing or databases are providing him. That's just not the structure of those words or the tenses of those other verbs. So therefore, best answer is choice A. 28. So central is this research to a J's design processes that his architecture firm. So first things first, this is really bad. I want to talk about processes, plural. And so I need, or I guess just a singular process, depending on which one, whichever one you want. Looking at the other choices, they all just use process. Let's get rid of A. But I do want a J's to have the apostrophe S because this is showing that he's possessing the process. So let's get rid of D as well. But there's only one a J. The J is one person. So I can't use S apostrophe, which would mean that there's multiple a J's, plural. And so I got to go with the apostrophe S version, which is singular. And so 28 is B. 29, transitional word. This research process can inform a J's designs in any number of ways. In the case of the design for this museum, the research influenced the shape of the building. While trying to understand the story the museum will be telling, he became fascinated with traditional sculptures made by Yoruba craftspeople of Western Africa. Blank, one type of headwear that reoccurred in figures, captured his imagination. The structure of the headwear became the shape of the museum. I don't want contrast here. I don't see any contrast. This sentence is sort of building on the previous sentences to show that he became fascinated, in particular with this headwear, and that became the shape. So I don't think we want to contrast. Moreover, is used when you're giving additional information or you're building more examples or reasons, but I don't think that's as precise as what we're looking for. I don't think a concluding sentence for these reasons. This is not, there's not a set of reasons and then here's sort of the conclusion. When we look at choice C in particular, we are narrowing the focus. The previous sentence talks about how he's fascinated with these sculptures, and then this sentence goes narrower to say the particular thing that captured his imagination and then became the basis for the structure. So in particular or specifically, either one of those words would have helped narrow the focus to the particular thing that's inspiring him. And so 29 is C. Okay, 30, we want to combine these sentences. By contrast, or in particular, one type of headwear that recurred in the figures captured a J's imagination. The structure of this headwear became the shape of the museum. Okay, let's look at A. Captured a J's imagination, and then the headwear structure became the shape. So this is not awful. It's just this is a very plain way of connecting them. So I'll hold it, but let's see if there's a more either condensed or meaningful way to connect these sentences. So the type of headwear captured a J's imagination as the structure of the headwear became the shape of the museum. I mean, maybe a little better than A. Again, I'm not really comfortable getting rid of it yet. The use of as to connect seems a little strange. But let's see what else there is. Sometimes you just got to hold your judgment. C. One type of headwear recurred in the figures so captured his imagination that. This so that word pair, I don't want to say it's always right when you see it, but it is so often right when you see this. They just like this structure for some reason. And this works perfectly. It really enhances the logic, right? This headwear so captured his imagination that it became the shape of the museum. Compare this to A, right? A is just like, oh yeah, this happened and then this happened. It doesn't have that intensity of that connection that C does with that structure. So I really like C. By contrast, one type of headwear that recurred in the figures, capturing imagination, the structure of it. I mean, D is terrible. It might even be a fragment. It's just very unclear about how those are being connected. So best answer here is definitely C. 31. At this point, the writer wants to reinforce the main point being made in the paragraph with a quote. Which of the following quotes from a lecture accomplish this? So first thing we got to do is figure out what is the main point being made in the paragraph. And the paragraph was about how a J's research can inform the design, and we have a specific example of how that happens. So, A, this museum comes into being after a 200-year quest to have a museum to really talk about the contribution of the African-American community to the identity of America. Don't know if that's so much about the design and the the research. But again, I'll hold it. I don't feel like I can 100% get rid of it yet, but let's see. Jay stated that he wanted to see if we could create a museum where the figure and form of the museum spoke to the story from the silhouette, from the immediate perception of it. The story from the silhouette, maybe the silhouette of the headwear. Let's hold it. I think it's better than A. I'm pretty confident getting rid of A at this point. C, we started with the Yoruba because they were great craftsmen. I mean, that they mentioned the Yoruba in the paragraph, or maybe it was right here. But this is not really about the main idea of the paragraph. D, it's a narrative museum, so it's not about precious objects. I don't know what that has to do with the design. Hey, B is the only one that has to do with the form, the figure and form of the museum, the design, and how that's consistent with the artifacts that he's looking at, the research that he's doing. So of the choices, B is most consistent. 32. Other architects, of course, conduct and rely on research when they design buildings, but a Jay's body of work has been defined by it. I mean, the original is fine. We have two complete sentences separated by a fanboys conjunction, but, and a comma. The others are going to create comma splices or, comma splices, basically. So the use of however and nonetheless meaning-wise are fine. It's just grammatically it's off. We need that comma and conjunction to separate my two complete sentences. So 32 is A. 33, which choice results in the most effective conclusion for the passage? So most effective conclusion for the passage. The passage is about this particular architect and his process for creating buildings and goes into a specific example. So let's look at the original. Whether or not you like the buildings, you have to admit that they're interesting to look at. Not the most exciting conclusion here. It's a little bit too opinionated, I guess, or based on what is your opinion or not. This just doesn't seem very relevant to the overall story that's being told about this architect. Because of the process, each building tells a unique story. If not about Jay's aesthetic style, then about the place in which and the people for whom it is built. I mean, that's pretty good. Focusing on the process, focusing on the outcome of that, how it's about his style, but also about the people for whom it's built. I think B's pretty good. In his career thus far, he has provided us with many spectacular buildings, each of which has some very interesting features. Okay, this is very boring, very interesting features, vague, just unspecific, and not really connecting to the process, the research, the work that goes into making these buildings and making them authentic. That's what this passage is about. Architecture firms that don't include a similar research. Okay, this is not about architecture firms in general, so best answer here is B.